Welcome to Muslims Doing Things, a podcast about extraordinary Muslims and their career journeys. And today I have Afshan Nasseri. Afshan, what do you do?
Hello, thank you for having me, Layla. So I basically run a marketing agency. Um, I'm the CEO and founder, so I kind of have my hands in everything every day. But we predominantly work with startups and small businesses across the food and beverage industry, CPG. We've done things in aerospace, beauty, getting into a little bit more beauty these days, and tech as well.
I'm really excited to get into this because I've had a lot of content creators on the show and I've had a lot of people with other forms of management, but I think it'll be really interesting to see the business side and understand what that entails and how you got there. Where did this journey start? Where were you born, Afshan?
Yeah, so I was born in Montreal, Canada. That's where both of my parents immigrated. My mom is from Lucknow, India. She immigrated to Montreal when she was 7. My dad is from Tehran, Iran, and he immigrated when he was 14 to Montreal. So they met in what we call CEGEP, which is like college or like I don't know, secondary school or something. It's like grade 13. So that's where they met and fell in love and blah blah blah, dated for 10 years. Then they had me and my sister and then me. And then so I was born there, and then my parents actually shifted to a small suburb in Massachusetts called Sharon, because my dad was a doctor and he was doing his residency at Brown University. So that's kind of the origins of my story.
That's amazing that they were both immigrants and they married across kind of immigrant cultures, which
Yeah,
is pretty remarkable. And then they also immigrated further from Canada to the United States and
yeah.
had you. And do you have any siblings?
I do. I have an older sister who is 32.
That's awesome. And so when you guys were growing up, did you know you wanted to get into marketing? Like, how did that journey go?
So I don't think so. So when I initially had applied into, so my dad's a doctor, my mom is like an executive in the pharmaceutical industry. And so she just got a job at GSK, but she was at Pfizer for like 22 years or something crazy. So science was like big in my household, but honestly, they never pushed anything onto me. I did well in science. I feel like I was like thinking about becoming a doctor, but it just wasn't something I was super passionate about. But I
Mhm.
remember so I applied into universities. I applied mostly into psychology, because I really liked psychology, which I had taken. But I think there was a point where I had to take, or I decided to take microeconomics in high school, because my sister did finance and business. And I think it was in the book Naked Economics where, or maybe it was in class, I don't remember. We started talking about like how certain things are made and built in order to kind of like manipulate humans. For example, Ben and Jerry's, you can always tell when there's a Ben and Jerry's in a certain vicinity because what they do is on top of their waffle cone making machine, they have like a little fan which releases the smell of the waffle cone, like throughout a vicinity, which I think is just like so interesting because
Yeah.
marketing is like a multi-sensory experience, right? And when I started realizing that these sorts of things were being done to us make certain decisions, that's kind of when I discovered like consumer behavior, and that brought me to marketing. And then I did my first internship at a marketing agency, in New York. It was a subsidiary of BBDO. It was called Atmosphere Proximity, and I did project management, so I was able to get my hands into everything. And then I just like thought, oh my god, what a wonderful world that I want to be a part of.
You know what's fascinating is I also love marketing through the lens of human behavior. I remember when I first got pregnant with my first child, I have 3 kids. When I first got pregnant with my first child, there was this thing that I had learned through a colleague that there's certain times in somebody's life where they become consumers like of a new genre and they're willing to buy. And pregnancy is the time when you're like most willing to reset lots of new habits. And so people are targeted based on this like major life event, right? So I'm not surprised, and I think people often don't draw those parallels of when is the right time to jump.
Yeah.
But I before we kind of go deeper down the marketing rabbit hole, um, and go into all of the things that you have learned and the things that you've grown. So you went to college, and when you were in college, as you're reading these things, did you know you wanted to do marketing? I mean, your dad's a doctor, my dad's a doctor. Lots of doctors have doctor kids. Were you kind of deciding what you didn't want to do, or did you have clarity into what you did want to do?
I don't think I had clarity per se. I think, okay, look, obviously I grew up in a certain sort of lifestyle. So I said, I need to be making a sort, like a salary that would maintain the lifestyle that I was used to. Initially, I thought that maybe I wanted to be a psychologist. And then my parents said, what about a psychiatrist? And then med school just seemed so daunting to me. And I just didn't think that I could do it. So I think from there, after my first internship, which was in marketing, which was kind of a random, pick. From there, I said, okay, this is interesting to me because one of the main things from there was this campaign that we were working on for Emirates Airlines, and Emirates is a very like glamorous airline to me, especially at that time. It was very new and shiny, and there was a campaign where they were doing a flight route from New York to or New York to India or something like that, and or to Dubai or Dubai to Delhi. Basically, they were attracting Indian consumers from all over the world, and they had to pick the actors for this campaign and what they will look like and different things like that. And I thought, how interesting. But why is this like El Salvadorian guy in New York City picking these models? It was a very random kind of thing that I noticed where there was a gap in how campaigns were created. So I think that was the point that really, really interested me. But up until that point, I was still very confused. I mean, I was still a freshman in university. I had the world, open to me.
Right.
I could choose anything that I wanted to, and I don't know. That was like a point for me where I was like, this is glamorous and fun.
And this stuff is evolving pretty rapidly. I mean, like, I think until pretty recently, that nobody would have raised an eyebrow at somebody, you know, picking out something to provide, to cater to Indian audiences or Desi audiences or whomever. That's super different. So you do this internship and you're in college. And did you study marketing?
No, I didn't because my sister, who again was in finance, she told me don't major in marketing. She said that it's better to have a degree which has like a different background in case you want to switch around. Or a lot of people do marketing degrees. That was her advice, and I didn't mind it. But for me, I always try to avoid math, so I needed to find another degree. I was in the business faculty at McGill University, Montreal. So I needed to find something that didn't involve math. So I did strategic management, which was like a consulting degree.
Yeah.
So a lot of strategy and things like that, which were also interesting things to me. And then I did actually a minor in classical Arabic and Fusha.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
And your background is Desi and Iranian, and you went straight to Arabic. That's
Yes.
wild.
Because I thought that I always was very curious about working in the Middle East and especially like Dubai. Um, it was, it's just something that I thought was so interesting growing up in such a white area that, oh my God, there's kind of this like utopia of where all of these cultures that I'm familiar with live together, but they're
Hmm.
still able to feel like they're in a Western enough world. So working in those regions was always kind of interesting to me. So I thought, why not Arabic? Because I felt I could learn Urdu on my own, Urdu Hindi. I felt I could learn Farsi on my own, but Arabic was something where I only knew from being Muslim basis. So from smaller Quran classes and stuff, Sunday school and things like that.
Yeah. And as you went through college, did you do more internships?
Yes. So I did an internship every year. And every year I got closer to the idea of I want to do, something crazy in marketing. So my first year was my second year, I was at Vice. That was honestly a useless part of my life, but it's actually when I became a blogger because I was so bored at my internship. Um, that so I was doing integrated marketing communications, but Vice was such a like youth run company that they were not into training individuals. And the first internship that I had was a lot of older people. So they were used to training younger people and making sure I was really enriched by whatever experience I got. But at Vice, I would check in at 8:30 in the morning and be like, hey, do you have any work for me? And I'm eager. I love to work. And they would be like, yeah, check back in a few hours. I check back
Oof.
around lunch, nothing. So I literally sunbathed my entire internship. because there was no work for me, and I didn't know what else to do. And so then there was a conversation that happened in the Vice office, like in front of me, um, where they were talking about putting together a sort of influencer list for the Vice India launch. And I said, hey, I could be a part of that. I'm very, because this girl, this white girl from Brooklyn was putting together the list. And I,
Right.
I was like, let me help you. I'm very aware of what's happening in pop culture in India. Um, and not from, I don't know, whoever's listening to this, some people who might be South Asian, they might know that there are many different ways a diaspora can be, but I was someone who visited India a lot and was very aware of what Indians in India were doing, what was actually cool, what was really not cool. And so I thought I could leverage, that knowledge that I had. So then I said, let me help you with this list. The list was horrible. It was included a lot of mainstream celebrities who would never speak their mind, because that's just how the media kind of is there. And from there, again, I had that feeling of, why was this girl putting together this list, and why did they go into India with this certain partner that they did? And then again, my third year came around. I did an internship in London. This was after I was obsessed with the show Scandal, so I thought maybe I should go into PR and crisis management. So I did an internship at a PR agency called MNC Saatchi, in London, and another one of those cultural moments happened. It was a great internship, and I really liked working in London as well. It was a different atmosphere, different way that diasporas absorbed culture. It's a much cooler, more advanced way, I think, than Americans, like Desis and Arabs, like the way that we do campaigns and things like that. They just have so much more going on, and so much more budget behind those things. But I remember there, they were, one of our clients, I think, was Etihad Airlines, and Ramadan was coming up. It was a summertime, and they said, what do we do for Ramadan? Like, I don't know. Like, should we have a dinner? Should we have this? Should we have that? And I was like, hello, ask me. Like,
Yeah.
why are you guys making these decisions when you don't even have the basic knowledge of where to start? So it was just all of those sorts of incidents that happened in my internship life, where I remember constantly looking for internships and roles that were around. They didn't exist, right? But it was something like a cultural liaison or someone to help with these campaigns. Then I stumbled upon, there were a few like cultural marketing agencies or inclusive marketing agencies. I don't remember what they were called at that time. I think they called them cultural marketing agencies or multicultural marketing agencies. But mostly they were geared towards Black and Latino people, because our minorities weren't really seen as large enough. In the UK, then I saw a little bit more of Muslim focused agencies, but it was uh it was definitely something that I realized needed to change and I wanted to get involved in.
Definitely something that I think we've all observed growing up is the lack of, this idea that the expectation is not to necessarily have somebody in the room who can produce the content, who's familiar with the room. And when it does happen, it's branded as like a niche, right? So the fact that it's even referred to as a cultural marketing agency means the baseline expectation is that like culture is an exception.
Yeah.
And we'll do you a favor. We can probably figure out on Instagram how your little culture works and figure out who your influencers are. But there's like a deeply embedded understand assumption that it can just be figured out pretty easily by anybody. You don't have to be of the culture. And I think that's something that our generation has probably shifted the most and played the biggest role in starting to shift. When you were at the PR agency, crisis management is super fascinating. What did you learn coming out of that you apply today?
No, so I mean, I wish I did crisis management, but I didn't really. I think there was no crises that I was handling remotely. I was actually working on, predominantly I was working on Red Bull Music Festival. I don't think they have it in the US, but it was big in the UK at that time, where they had a massive boat party on multiple different boats, that went on the River Thames, and each boat had its own genre. So that was definitely not a crisis. It was just something that I was doing, but I was basically using that kind of PR as a way to see, what was PR like, and then get into crisis management. Um, I didn't get into any of the actual crisis management internships I applied to. Um, for some reason, the corporate roles, I never got them. It was always when I was like cold emailing smaller agencies that had roles, and I was able to show my personality a little bit more in the internship or application process, I would only get roles then, which is a big reason why I keep my firm like people who identify as women of color, because I feel like something in the system is not really cut out for us. And we're not able to show our personalities and our strengths. And that's, I always think back to that time when I felt like no one was really giving me a chance, even though I felt like I had the things and I was eager and I was ready to learn and I was ready to get my hands dirty. That's a big reason why I keep that as one of my company values.
And when you graduated, did you start your company or did you do something between graduation?
So again, I was looking for one of those cultural something roles, looking for anything that I could get my hands on, and didn't find that, but I did get involved with a big skincare company. Well, today it's like kind of big. It's called Avrani. So they are a skincare company, skincare startup. Back then, I was their second hire, but they did Indian inspired skincare, kind of like K beauty, like Korean beauty, but Indian. And it was one of the first. Now there's quite a few competitors in the space. But yeah, I was their second hire. I was their marketing associate, and then 3 months after that, I was going to become the director of marketing, like right.
Yeah. Sounds like second higher trajectory.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, "What?" And I was just so confused 'cause I didn't understand, like, the startup world. I remember before my job, they were like, I was like, "Okay, so what are the hours?" And they were like, "There's no hours, this is a startup." And I was like, "What does that mean?" And so anyways, I was just kind of thrusted into this world. That was my role, that was the job. It was interesting because I was able to take my cultural knowledge that I knew, and I was honestly, arguably, especially at that time when I graduated, I had a lot of knowledge that other people didn't have because of my going back and forth and because I was an influencer in the South Asian American space. I was one of like the first because that's like when I cared about being on social media and stuff. Now, obviously, not as much, but I really had like a lot of knowledge that I wanted to share, and I brought that to the skincare company. But I left after like 3 months.
Did your platform help you get that job?
Yeah, so I think that I was valuable because I really understood the consumer, being like a South Asian influencer, being very embedded in that space, being someone who, this sounds very weird, but arguably was talking and maybe setting certain trends at that time. I was talking about Indo-Western clothing and things like that. So I think I was placed there for that reason. So
Uh-huh.
that, yes, my platform helped me get my job, I think.
And what were your platforms then, and what were the sizes of them?
So at that time in I was mostly on Instagram. I was never like a YouTube person. I kind of fell into influencing because there was a very specific space that Muslims and South Asians and Arabs used to fall into back in like between 2017 to 2019. It was a very closed off space. There wasn't that many influencers there. I think I still had like 30,000 followers on my Instagram, but it was to the point where it was like such a engaged and niche community where if I were to like go out in New York City, I would 100% be like stopped by 2 to 3 people. Like every time a brown person looked at me, I knew because we didn't have many people in that space back then. So it was a very different kind of environment. Now, so many people are talking about culture. So many people are proud of wearing South Asian clothes. But it started as a very hyped up thing, then it became more normalized, and now it's like just an everyday thing where people just post in South Asian clothing and about Ramadan and things like that. It's just interesting to see how the space has changed in the past few years. It's good.
Yeah. I can't speak to the South Asian experience, but I will tell you as part of the Muslim experience, I've seen it change, shift drastically probably from, like, 2013 until now, and I think we're in the
Yeah,
middle of the shift.
yeah,
I know there are a lot of Muslim influencers for sure and kind of just defining this new Muslim millennial female primarily. I don't really, I don't have as much of a, like, opinion or follow, frankly, as many as, like, the men trying to influence lifestyle, but there certainly is a like generation of women defining this experience publicly on social media, a generation of women who are defining even like consumerism, defining how brands should represent us. Um, and actually it's really incredible when I think about it because it's to the point that if I, for example, like if I look at an aloe ad and I consume a lot of aloe, like where's Aisha Harun and aloe, for example? Why haven't they called her up yet? So I think that this generation of women in which you're describing and which you're a part of, um, has set expectations and reset expectations, but I would say it's been a pretty long timeline. Like, it really started in maybe even earlier than 2013, and it's kind of like somebody should definitely, if they haven't written a book about it, could, because we had like the early Dina Tokyos and Asias, and things have just evolved so much. And I totally hear you when you say that the space has just evolved so immensely and become so broad. And the view is definitely more limited in the past, and now it's so wide.
Yeah.
So I hear you, and I totally get it. Um, so you started your you started your firm after all that?
Yeah, so then I quit my job, and then I I think my grandfather had passed or something, and my mom needed some help going to India for some property things. So I said, "Look, I'm free. I'll help you." Stressful doing property things and like dealing with the law in India. So I went and helped her for like 1 or 2 months, and then the pandemic hit. Um, so then I was stuck because I had only graduated that summer. I didn't really have much of a portfolio to my name. Um, and again, my network wasn't very strong, which is why it was hard for me to get that corporate job in the first place that I wanted. So from there, I had to hustle because marketing roles were being cut left and right during the pandemic. And I just hustled and tried to freelance. My first client was a COVID decontamination client, um, and a
On
dermatologist.
brand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Not glamorous, but I did what I had to do. And then people started to give me more and more projects. I was just trying to market myself as much as I could. And then there were projects where I couldn't complete the scope, but I had this amazing network of people, of creatives, and especially creatives of color that I had worked with as an influencer, right? Or known in the space, especially the New York City space. So that's when I started leveraging that network and being able to give opportunities to those people. So that's what I did. And then I got into my master's and I said, should I continue this? The ball is kind of rolling. I'm making a bit of money. And my parents were like, of course you should keep doing it. And you should do both. So I'm like, okay, I'll try. So I did both. I did my master's in London. I went to Imperial College Business School and I finally did marketing. So I did strategic marketing. And then I was simultaneously running my company. And that's how things like really started to grow. And then a year after that, I rebranded to Creative. I think it was in like May of 2021.
And what did it mean in terms of getting your company up and running? Were the early days like you reaching out to brands and saying, "Hey, I'll do these things," and what were these things? Like, what did lay out to me the steps if you had to kind of write a biography about it?
Oh man. Okay. So, hmm, the first step. So first we were called Lives for Social because it was a play on my Instagram handle, Lives for Living. Um, then I started with personal brands because personal brands are much easier to handle and understand. And
Meaning influencers. You reached out to influencers and said, "Hey,
well,
let me," or
I was
what's
working
a
with a
personal brand? Okay,
dermatologist first.
got it.
So a lot of doctors and things these days want to be big on social
Yeah.
media, right? So that's a huge network and space. And it doesn't. I also know the doctor space because of my parents, and I'm able to understand certain jargon. So I said I'll try that.
And what
So
did that look like? A website, an Instagram page, getting them
yeah,
followers? Like, what did it look like?
exactly. So making sure that they had like a content schedule, a strategy, a logo, a website, um, cranking out more and more content, making sure that they were posting every week. So just kind of like support because these are doctors at the end of the day. They're not Gen
Yeah,
Z.
they
So
have no interest.
yeah,
Most of them have no interest in busting out their IG and making sure
exactly.
they're
Exactly. So I was there as like a support system. And I was someone who already grew my personal brand. So it was an easier sell, basically.
yeah, you had credibility.
Exactly, in that realm. Then so that's how I started, and I reached out to my network. So I just told my sister, told everyone. My sister was 32, so she knew more people with more disposable income, more people who were doctors, right? And then I started there. I had already had a dental client. She had her own dental clinic while I was in university. I had started working with her. Someone referred her to me. Didn't do much, like very small social media posts and things like that, but it was still something that I had. So now I was kind of carving out this medical niche. Okay, I definitely did not want to be in the medical niche, but it was just something that I had to start out with. And then from there, I realized like what I could do, and I started formulating different things. I had I had my sister, I think, post on her LinkedIn because my sister was much older in finance, had a very good network of people. And then from there, I got a lead that got me into aerospace. So some guy that she knew was looking for someone to do a PR campaign for this reusable small rocket that went into orbit. I don't even know. I can't even describe this product to you. It's an orbit machine, okay? It's a rocket that went into space. And he needed help with PR. So I only did that one small internship in PR. That was my whole experience. And I was an intern. So then I started recruiting people. I said, "Hey, I need help on this PR project. Can someone help me? I'm obviously going to pay you, etc." That's how I started these projects. So LinkedIn, posting everywhere, making sure I looked semi good. I made a little website for myself on Squarespace, listed some services. I didn't have PR on there, for example, but like I had social media, content creation, copywriting, like I'm a good writer, influencer marketing, things like that. Then from there, um, posted everywhere. I think after that, I started sharing tips. I started making YouTube videos because I saw that that was a way that a lot of people grew. So I tried that way, and that wasn't that helpful, to be honest. I realized I didn't use LinkedIn in the beginning, which was very silly of me. I should have done that. And then I think I just started talking a lot about the projects that I was doing. So
Hmm.
for the aerospace client, we got them into TechCrunch, for example, and all of the bigger space like publications that they needed to be on. So then we said, "Hey, we just got this client into TechCrunch. Hey, we just did this for this client." When you kind of sensationalize what you're doing, brands and founders look at you and say, "Hey, if she can do that with that brand, she can do it with my brand."
Right.
And I really had to sensationalize a lot of things because that's how people talk in marketing, A. Second of all, you have to do that. I had no choice. I had no portfolio. I had nothing to work on. I didn't have a strong marketing network. I had to do what I could to grow in any way possible. And I was willing to do literally anything and make zero margins, but I needed to get my hands on anything. Um, Other steps that I took, I tried to go on to different freelancing platforms. That didn't work out for me because I didn't have enough to show. So I
Like
really
what? What are the freelancing platforms?
so there are a few that are UK based and there are some that are US based. One is called Juno. That's a UK based platform. One is called Working Not Working. That's US, UK, Canada, etc. I didn't go on to Upwork and what's that?
Yeah, those are typically offshore. Like the rates are really low.
Exactly. Yeah. And I just thought I those are not people who care about quality, so I'm not going to be able to give
Typically,
you
the
money.
value prop people are optimizing against is cost when they go there, and
Exactly.
that's not the clientele you're necessarily looking for.
No.
Yeah,
And so I never went on websites like that. I went on to
yeah.
the other ones. And I really tried to tout this whole cultural thing, but still no one was really listening to that. So I said, okay, you know what? I'll get to that later in life. I just need to focus on like doing
Mhm.
anything right now.
Yeah.
Um, so that's kind of like what I did.
And
It was
typically, like,
necessary.
no, I think it's super interesting because the thing is so I understand why LinkedIn would be really useful, and I understand why your sister's posts would really resonate with people because I know, for example, many people like in business, myself included, honestly, and it's funny because even me, like I create a lot of content. I built
Yeah.
like a pretty big platform, frankly, across TikTok and Instagram. And I have no strategy because I'm like, I can't prioritize this. Like I
No, you
just
can't.
everything is just left and right and it's chaotic. And there's, sometimes I'll make a series and I'll never finish them. And you really never know what to expect, right?
Yeah.
And I've never prioritized. I think I've tried a few times sitting down and saying, okay, this is what I'm gonna do, this is how I'm gonna do it. And I just don't do it. It's like so far down on my list that it never happens.
Yeah. Because
Um,
it's only for yourself. Because
it's
no
only for
one
myself. Exactly. And like I'm sure it'll pay off. I'm sure like in 10 years, 15 years, at some point I'm gonna write a book and be like, damn, I really should have, been on YouTube sooner or something. Whatever. That's like kind of not the priority. But so what that really means is that when you come across people like me or business owners in my shoes, you have to create a value proposition, right?
yeah.
Because your value proposition can be like, yeah, I'll get you into TechCrunch, but like getting into TechCrunch the first time is easy. It's the second time that's hard. So you
Mm,
have to prove that you're the person who can get people into TechCrunch the second time and the third time and the fourth
yeah.
time. Or maybe that's not their goal. Maybe it's not visibility, right? Maybe their goal is more followers, or maybe their goal is like, we just don't want to look like we're bootleg. And right now, like whatever we've got put together is just not doing it. How do you work through the process of figuring out the value you're going to deliver in a space where, frankly, like you have to often, the value is so obvious to people who get it, but to people who don't, it's not.
Yeah. So how do I
So how do you like put a value story together? So you know
yeah,
you
like, how
come
do I
across a
pitch?
doctor, right?
Okay. So, okay, now I don't pitch to doctors, thank God. Now
It is good money. That's funny. I had a friend who used to only build websites for doctors, and she
yeah.
cashed out.
Yeah,
Anyway, it's
because
another
well,
story.
first of all, building websites, like, especially if the people on the other side are not South Asian, they pay a lot more, right? The thing
Oh
is that
yeah,
South Asians know how much things can be done in India and Pakistan and things like that. So white people, they will pay tens of thousands of dollars for websites to be done, and they
oh
will
yeah. No, I've seen it.
the
But
worst
typically, it's not just the technology. Like a lot of people use these bases like Squarespace and stuff, but it's the aesthetic. And
yeah,
if you offshore, you can't often get that brand aesthetic
yes,
unless you have somebody who really understands the project management. But
yes,
if you have like what they're paying for mostly is probably your intellectual property to say, yeah, sure, that's fine. Those are the people building it, but this is the brand I'm going to deliver. This is the experience I'm going to deliver, and people can't offshore that. I
yeah.
mean, they can, but they have to understand it.
So that's my company's kind of value prop is that I put in the extra effort beforehand, training, in short, I like hand pick the people that I hire, especially people from off like from different countries, and I make sure that they have the working style that like Westerners are comfortable with. They have the aesthetic that people from here are comfortable with. And it's hard to find those people. And then sometimes you have to kind of say, you can't respond to an email after 48 hours. It has to be within. Or certain you can't say hey to a client. You have to say hello or hi. And these little things, that's how I bridge that gap. I know exactly what you're talking about, but that's a story for another time. Okay.
Yeah.
So value proposition. So I think the way that I pitch, so nowadays I pitch much more to startups and to small businesses. And I think the thing that makes us very different is that you don't have to explain to us your brand because we come from the same cultural background. So that's what a lot of brands are looking for. So we don't only work with culturally nuanced brands or culturally rooted brands, but that's our special sauce, right? And so a lot of founders find a lot of relief in the fact that they don't have to explain to us what their dish is or what dal is like or what is khichdi like. They don't have to tell us these things because we know because my team is made up of people or whoever I would put up on that client, they would understand the cultural nuances. So I think a lot of brands that come to us when they're really tired or the right time to get them is when they're tired of working with marketers who they might look really good, they might sound good, but they just don't get the product and the brand story because they don't belong to that cultural background. They get tired of working with people like that and then they say, okay, this is like a sigh of relief when we get to work with this team that understands certain things that other people can't understand. And then it allows us to be more innovative, right? Because if a marketing agency doesn't understand the baseline of your product, I'm thinking, for example, I have this client, they're called the Cumin Club. They do Indian meal kits. It's dehydrated Indian food that comes produced in India. They sell it in like individual sized packets. It's a subscription service. So we have dishes that are all vegetarian. They're spicy, obviously. It's real Indian food. Our first consumer is Indians who have come to this country for school, for work, etc. So that's like our baseline clientele. And then after that, it's, vegans, vegetarians, people who are looking for an easy shortcut meal, but they're also cultural enthusiasts, etc. So let's say for a client like that, yes, we understand the baseline product, we understand like the baseline consumer, but then how do you innovate, right? If you don't get that first bit. So because we do understand that first bit and we are fully immersed in that culture, we can innovate and say, hey, what about this meme? I think this will really resonate with this audience. So I think that is our whole kind of value proposition. And I think being Gen Z and millennial really helps with that as well. I think people see that we are really into this culture. We are really into social media. We have a great pulse. So I think that those are the main things that really sell us as a brand or as
Yeah.
a
And then do you put success metrics together? For example, like is success, having a beautiful website, or is success actually the engagement? How do you tell the story back that, hey, I was worth it?
Yeah, I think that's hard to do because it depends on what the business goals are, right? So for the Cumin Club, for example, the brand I was talking about, when we came in 2021, I believe, or early 2022, they had around 2,000 followers. A big thing behind them was growing their community because the founders had no idea how to do that. They didn't have a marketing person. We were their first marketing people. So they started 2,000. We closed off that client at 11,000 followers. And
Mhm.
then I think visually also we were able to completely elevate them. How do you quantify visually elevating a business? I don't
It's
know, but the founders were able to see it. You know what I'm
yeah,
saying?
people get it or they don't.
Yeah. Like and some clients won't, and as someone who gets clients, you'll be able to start to feel out those red flags of this guy is not going to understand what you're bringing to the table. Do not sign with him because
So you'll reject clients.
oh, for sure. Oh my
Yeah.
god. 100% because
Yeah.
I've worked with nightmare
Yeah.
clients, and guess what? Your team gets burned out. You get burned out having to, put out fires every day. And if clients are not, I don't even ask that you give us compliments. I just ask that you understand what we're doing here. And that's all that I really ask for of my clients. And if they don't do that, I won't sign with them because it just becomes hell on earth for
Yeah.
all of on the team. And the people that I work with are really, really good people, and they're really motivated and they're really eager, and they don't deserve to be spoken to like that. And so yes, 100% I will reject clients. And yeah, I've rejected so many clients, especially because of budget issues. A lot of a lot of businesses will come to us with saying, hey, can you do a logo for me for $300? Like, these are artists, like, they can't do that. But yeah, so that's my word
How
of
do
advice.
you how do you figure pricing out?
I really felt it out as I went along. I did used to offer things in very, very cheap prices. But I think I slowly grew my network of other marketers, and I started to see what people were charging, hourly rates, what that looked like. Like, I'm trying to think the first time, the first few times, and I think I would give this advice to anyone who's like just starting out, is figure out your hourly rate, accurately think about how many hours this project is going to take you, then add on a few more buffer hours in case you know, mess up your estimation, and then add on a sort of margin or whatever it might be for any overhead costs or fixed costs. As a
Mm.
freelancer, that's not an immense amount, but that's how you have to start planning your like savings.
Yeah.
And so that's what I would do. It's very difficult. It's not easy. It's something that you'll have to do a lot of feeling out about. Some people are very open about talking about rates, and so I really suggest you have those conversations. I have a really close friend in the industry who also she works in an agency, and she also runs some of her own clients. She's predominantly in the personal brand space, but she talks to me about numbers. I talk to her about numbers, and
Mm.
I couldn't be more grateful for connections like that because I don't want to look stupid at the end of the day
Yeah.
pitching these low amounts. And and I've done that before. So,
Yeah.
and it feels horrible.
And there isn't a ton of transparency. Like on TikTok more recently, salary
Yeah.
transparency is becoming really big. Creator transparency is huge. Like before, honestly, 2 years ago, I would have had no idea what people charge. Now I think I have a pretty good estimate because so many creators are so open about what they're making. Um, the most of which is in beauty, so I'm not surprised to say that you're kind of headed headed towards beauty or doing more in beauty, and so I'm not surprised that, like, I think this is the case in a lot of creative spaces. It's really hard to figure out what to charge somebody, and
And such new
especially
industry.
when in what now?
It's such new industries too. You
It's new industries,
yeah,
and people are like, "Well, I could," back to this, "Well, I could just do it cheaper abroad, right? I could just have somebody build me a website." It's like, "Yeah, sure, you can, but, like, what's your brand?" And you're not realizing that there's a lot of strategy that goes behind it in order for it to be successful. So I totally get that. And now you said that what are the industries you primarily find yourself in now?
so we just signed a beauty client, which I'm very excited about. We haven't done too much of that before, um, which I kind of like because I think since we're an agency of only women of color. I think people expect us to only be in beauty and fashion, but we've actually done a lot of like very interesting things, and we're all quite passionate about CPG. So we do a lot of consumer packaged goods, food and beverage space, because the Cumin Club was one of our biggest clients that almost like my whole firm was involved with. And we had a lot of learnings on that client because we had been with them for so long and we did a lot of different things for them. So food and bev, then we've done some fashion, we've done like mass fashion and then high-end fashion, then which are different, you know, luxury space versus non-luxury space. Then we did aerospace like I told you about. We do stuff for this tech company. I guess you would call them like service as a software.
Yeah,
They're
SaaS.
called Deliverect, yeah. And it's like an aggregator platform for like point of sale systems.
Yep.
Um, and then so I guess that's like yeah, SaaS. And
Yeah,
then
it's SaaS for sure.
yeah, SaaS. And then what else have we done? The medical stuff, I don't even count that anymore. I like so triggered by it. I try to stay away. And then I think those are the major industries that we've worked. Oh, nonprofit.
Yeah.
We've done a few things in there. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and most of your team's offshore right now?
So we have I want to say about one fourth of my team is in the US and Canada.
Mhm.
I want to say half of my team is in London. So you can consider that offshore, I guess, but it's because um, I did my master's there, and we have a big client there. They do like chai kiosks across London. They're called the Chai Guys. And I really like the way that people in London, like I said before, that they understand culture, and it's like not so forced. It's the ideas that they come up with. I think because culture is much more integrated for them in their daily life. Like there you see like ads for doing zakat and ads for Ramadan, and every brand there is talking about Ramadan.
Yeah,
So all of these brands. And so for them, it doesn't have to be so overhyped and forced. And I love
right.
that. And so that's why I really love working with people from London.
Yeah,
Um, the time zones get a bit annoying, but I just love that. So I would say about half my team is there. And then a lot of my designers and developers, like graphic designers and developers, are in India, Indonesia, and Pakistan.
yeah. And so would you say the majority of your time is in, like, closing clients? Is it in actually doing the tactical work? Is it in, like, managing a global team?
Yes. Oh my God.
Yeah, it's a
Managing
lot, it's a lot, it's a lot.
it's so horrible. And also I live half time. Like I split my time between the east coast of the US and then Karachi, Pakistan, because I married someone from there.
And
Who
he's there now?
yeah, he just left
Wow.
yesterday. Yeah.
Left to
So
go where? To come
no, to go back to Karachi. He was
Oh,
here.
okay, I was like, left to go where?
No, literally. It's so crazy. We got married like 8 months ago and I moved there like 7 months ago. So I do like a back and forth life. It's
Yeah,
like
it's really I've done back and forth between Boston, LA, and that's hard. I can imagine Karachi and you're in New York, right?
but
Or you Karachi and Boston is also not
yeah.
easy.
Yeah, it's so hard. And so basically, I'm running back and forth between the 2 cities trying to stay relevant. And then sorry, what was your question?
About what you do, like
Oh, yeah.
your day to
So,
day.
mostly my day-to-day is I would say, like, a fourth of it is putting out fires, but honestly, my team is really good, so, like, less fires these days. Um, I have an individual consulting role for that company, the Cumin Club. So some of my time is dedicated there. I lead brand partnerships for them. And that's obviously a role because of my network of other business, South Asian run businesses and AAPI run businesses and things like that. And my knowledge of the cultural bits of the space. And then, so a fourth of my time is dedicated there, I would say. Then a fourth of my time is dedicated to, like you said, leads and closing those leads and things like that. And then I want to say another fourth of my time is these days business development, because I have been trying to do a lot of that these days, getting very scared about, when that whole thing happened to SVB,
Right.
things like that affect us too, right?
Of course,
Because,
yeah.
yeah, because then startups, especially the CPG startups, they don't want to invest in an agency, a marketing agency. So a lot of my business development these days is actually focused on like networking and getting clients in the Middle East. So I'm looking a lot these days at in Dubai, in Saudi, in Qatar, because I see a lot of like opportunity there. They're looking for Canadians, Americans, and things like that. So I'm looking a lot in that space. So doing a lot of that stuff as well.
Yeah, and are you able to do your job pretty much entirely virtually?
Yes.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Basically all.
you're just around the clock. You're always on the clock probably based on the different time zones, but
Yeah.
you can do the entire thing virtually.
Yeah.
Is your plan to grow the brand? Like, how do you wanna do you wanna just grow and grow and grow and grow it? Or kind of how do you hope that this will develop?
So I think honestly, I did not think I would be a business owner like 2 years ago. So I don't always have like very clear like goals, but I think one goal of mine is we started our first newsletter. It's called The Pulp. Because means mango, so the pulp is like mango pulp. It's like a juicy squeeze. And my team is really excited about the newsletter, and I'm excited for it too because we really want it to be like a roundup for brands and marketers to see what they need to know about what's going on culturally. What do they need to know about Ramadan? How do they talk about Ramadan? What are the campaigns that are interesting to Muslims during Ramadan? Like what has been done well? So and I don't think that there's many newsletters like that or sources of information like that, that brands and marketers can come see. So I think growing that newsletter would be really important to me,
Yeah,
because I would have loved to have something like that, just
yeah,
because I'm like a marketing nerd. So that's one thing that I'm excited about, and it's a goal of mine. And I think that will help us create a nice community. And you can work a certain extent, but it's nice to also feel like you're doing something bigger than work and more that's attributing to like the culture and the knowledge that's being passed around. So that's one thing. Another thing is definitely want to grow my firm. Want to have the ability to hire more of my contractors as full-time employees. So for me, it's really about stabilizing my revenue. Because honestly, I started this company when I was like 23. Like, oh my God, I have a lot to learn. I just turned 26. So stabilizing my revenue is like a really big thing, to help me get more full-time employees. I think that'll give me a better sense of security and help me to grow the brand. Then, and just, I think, so we started a new service, which was coming back to my dream of cultural consulting. So we haven't like officially launched it on all of our platforms yet, but cultural consulting for us is basically it's mostly a service for larger businesses that have budgets. For example, we're pitching to Delta Airlines. So Delta has a flight route, and I was actually an influencer for it. So a lot of these things are like very full circle. So they have a flight route from JFK to Bombay, and it's their first straight to India flight route. And their campaign was non like non bread, non-stop to Bombay in X amount of hours. And we said we can do better. There's more that we can do here. We can do like a guide for how to like discover Bombay and things like that. We can bring more into this campaign. So we're basically pitching to companies like Delta about campaigns like this and saying, hey, this is what you should be doing. This is how we can help you. We can give you the Gen Z perspective. We can give you the South Asian diaspora perspective, the Muslim perspective, all of these things. Even companies that have maybe like a halal segment to it or things like that. We're trying to come in. So cultural consulting, huge barriers to entry because they're much bigger companies. It's harder to get in front of the right people, but it's something that I really want to grow because it's been my dream for like since I saw the Emirates campaign when I was 18 or
yeah,
19, right? When I was
yeah.
19. And it's been my dream to just have the right people in some of these rooms and for us to see on TV and things like that. Like, oh my God, that was actually really funny. Like, and I'm South Asian and I really got that commercial and I loved it. So, and to teach other people, right, about these things that we follow and what we practice. So, those are my major goals for now.
It's funny because I think the big corporations, everybody's scared of getting canceled, right? So like, there's also a liability thing that
I'm
would,
dangling that over their heads.
yeah, that truly, you know what I mean? Because it's like, okay, we can make the campaigns that just won't say anything stupid, frankly.
Yeah,
Like, we'll make sure that we're saying the right things.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And what do you wish you told? What do you wish you told Afshan from 3 years ago?
So many things. Stop being such a pushover.
Yeah.
Um, Stop being a pushover. Be more assertive and I mean, I had just so much like of an inferiority complex because I had so many friends who were at these big corporations and brands, and I was a dumb dumb who quit her job and then a pandemic hit, and because I thought I could do more, and it wasn't to build my own company, it was just to get another job. And I just had such an issue seeing my friends with these stable salaries, and it was a privilege that I didn't have to have a stable salary, but like it just gave me such a complex sometimes. Um and so I wish that I wasn't like that and I just powered through a bit more. I wish I shouted a little bit more. And I wish I dropped some really bad clients before they gave me like mental crises. Um, but yeah, I think that was what I would tell her.
That is the fast path to growth, though, is you deal with a few nightmares early
Yes,
and
for
you learn
sure.
quickly, you know? And, like, you definitely wanna do that when you're a young organization and you don't have too much on the line, so you
Yeah.
have the opportunity to grow in the right way, so I could totally see how all that is. Are you the, like, do you have an executive leadership team, or are you kind of the are you it?
So I have a head of HR and biz dev. So it's like a shared role. But she does it part-time. And having her on relieved so much of my efforts. Oh my God. And just having that support, that someone to talk to. Then she went on sabbatical because she works for Target full time. She works in their like inventory planning. It's like a lot of analytics. And so it gets really crazy for her, especially around the winter time when like the Super Bowl happens and things like that. Cause she works in the frozen aisle. So like frozen pizzas and things like that. She has such a funny job. Um she always like is crying about pizzas. It's crazy. But so having her on my team is really nice and she's coming back now. She's easing back in. And I have my first full-time employee. But I think my next step is getting someone else, because I can't have the head of HR slash biz dev like fully, because of her other job and obviously her financial stability. I can't pay someone, as a full time
Right.
role for that right now. But I think getting one more person who's really supporting me, is gonna allow me to grow other parts of the business and have
Yeah.
some more brain space.
Yeah, definitely. No, I could see that, and for people who wanna follow your journey, first of all, before we get to you and where they can find you, who should reach out to you?
Hmm. Well, if you have a brand, if you have a brand or you work at a corporation where you're like, okay, they need some cultural love in some of their marketing campaigns, definitely reach out to us. If you are at or run a startup, um, or a small business and you're looking for any sort of social media, PR, paid media, influencer marketing, logo design, any of that kind of help, we definitely have your back. So you can reach out to me, and also anyone who's just like wants to chat, in marketing. I'm looking for some more junior level marketers right now, who are really eager and ready to learn, um, because we are growing a little bit. Alhamdulillah, some Ramadan blessings. So yeah, reach out to me if you're fall into any of those categories, or if you just want to chat, I'm down.
And where can they find you to reach out to you?
Yeah, so you can email me, Afshan, AFSHAN, at amcreative.co, not com, co.
And spell creative.
Creative. Is mango, so it's AAM, and then creative dot co.
Awesome. Awesome, and how about on social? Where can people follow you and the company?
Yeah, so you can follow me at Life's for Living. Oh, I made it when I was 14. It's still very cringy to say. You can probably search Afshan or Life's for Living and it'll come LIFESFORLIVING. And then the company is Creative on Instagram.
I will definitely put that in the show notes. Also, I didn't ask you, but I'm so curious. At 14 years old, like, did you know you wanted to be an influencer, or did you just post and
No,
people followed you?
I never wanted to be an influencer. I never even watched a YouTuber in my life. It was just I'm telling you the space was so dry that
Yeah.
I just was naturally wearing like South Asian fusion clothes because of just what I wanted to. And then a photographer in New York City who was my close friend, he was like you have to like share your story, and I had a lot of hot takes on culture because of like my going back and forth and me being mixed and blah blah blah. So, and it wasn't like I hate auntie culture, it was very different, okay? And
Yeah.
so, basically, he just started taking pictures of me and he was like, "Write," and, like, I'm not a bad writer, to be honest, and so I would just write, like, my opinion, and that's how I, like, started my Instagram.
I
It
love
was
it. At
that's how I
14.
got to, like yeah, like oh, no, well, I mean, it really started when I was in university,
Yeah.
like, so when I was 18, but yeah, I mean, that's why. Obviously, nowadays, people don't really appreciate that same kind of, like I don't wanna say softness, but not overdone vibe on Instagram. They're always
Yeah.
looking for something, and I think that's why it's just, like, not really a space where I thrive anymore. And also just my life has been so crazy with going to Karachi and stuff. So maybe I'll find my way back onto social media in like a big way, but I'm just floating along for now.
No, I feel you. I feel you. I think Instagram requires a lot of effort, and back
Yeah,
to, like, strategy and thought, back to what I was talking about where I was saying if you don't invest the time in it, it's just floating and you're like, "Okay, it is what it is." But,
yeah.
that's awesome. Thank you so LOL pun on that. So, thank you so much for joining and teaching us about Uncreative and just your general journey. I think it's really cool to see somebody who started so young. It's great because you started because you thought you were in crisis. Turns out that crisis was probably the best thing that ever happened to you, and not
Yeah.
being able to find a job, maybe getting blown off because you didn't look like the other applicants or whatever it may be. And within 3, 4 short years, you've been able to really build this company. It's really cool to hear about. Thank you so much for your time, Afshan, and I look forward to watching the company grow.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Thank you for having me.